The morning alarm screamed through the metal halls of Nexus Station like it did every day at exactly 0600 hours. Dongwu rolled out of his narrow bunk and landed softly on the cold floor. His roommate Jin-Ho was already pulling on his uniform, muttering something about another tough day ahead. "You ready for Vexitar's class today?" Jin-Ho asked, fixing his collar in the small mirror beside their door. Dongwu just nodded. He was always ready, but he never said much about it. That was his way. In the 6 months since arriving at the Galactic Military Academy, he had learned that staying quiet kept him out of trouble. The alien cadets barely noticed him, and that was fine. The two humans walked through the corridors together. Other species towered over them as they passed. The Krathari cadets stood nearly 8 feet tall with their thick gray skin and massive shoulders. Their claws clicked against the metal walls as they moved. The Veltani glided past like elegant ghosts, their long arms and pale blue faces always calm and thinking. Even the smaller alien species looked down at the human cadets with something that felt like pity. "There go the soft ones," Dongwu heard a Krathari whisper to his friend in their growling language. Jin-Ho's jaw tightened, but Dongwu just kept walking. He had heard worse things in the past months, much worse. They entered the advanced tactical history classroom and found their usual seats near the back. The room was huge, built to fit all the different alien body types. Dongwu always felt small here, surrounded by beings that evolution had made into perfect warriors. His human classmates scattered around the room looked just as out of place. Hye Jin, one of the few humans who seemed to belong here, sat in the front row. She was brilliant with engineering and technology, always asking smart questions that made the alien instructors pause and think. The other human cadets respected her, even if some of the aliens still treated her like a curiosity. Commander Vexitar entered the room with heavy footsteps. His scarred face told stories of real battles fought in real wars. 3 yellow eyes scanned the classroom, and everyone fell silent. Even the proudest Krathari cadets sat up straighter when Vexitar looked their way. "Today we study warriors," the commander announced, his voice like grinding stone. "Real warriors who changed the course of galactic history." Dongwu settled back in his chair. These lessons were always interesting, even if they sometimes felt like reminders of what humans could never be. Vexitar pulled up images of famous battles on the large screen at the front of the room. "The Battle of Zerion Prime," Vexitar said, showing a massive space battle. "Commander Thaktor held off an entire fleet with just 12 ships. His people still sing songs about his courage." The Krathari cadets puffed up with pride. Thaktor had been one of their greatest heroes. "The defense of the Crystal Worlds," Vexitar continued. "General Lysiavan used her people's natural telepathy to coordinate. A perfect defense. Not one enemy ship reached the planet." Now the Veltani cadets looked pleased. Their ancestor had saved billions of lives that day. Dongwu watched the images flow past. Great battles, brilliant strategies, impossible victories. All won by aliens with natural advantages that humans would never have. No claws or telepathy or armored skin. Just soft flesh and simple minds according to most of the galaxy. These warriors shared certain qualities, Vexitar explained, walking between the rows of seats. Superior physical abilities, advanced mental capabilities, weapons and technology that matched their natural gifts. A Krathari cadet raised his clawed hand. "Commander, what about species that lack these natural advantages? How could they ever produce true warriors?" Several alien cadets glanced back at the human section of the classroom. The question was not really about theory. "An interesting question, Cadet Morgath," Vexitar replied. "Some species adapt through technology, others through numbers. But true legendary warriors, they are rare among the less physically gifted races." Dongwu felt Jin-Ho tense beside him. His roommate hated these moments when their entire species got dismissed so casually. But Dongwu just kept listening. He had learned that anger changed nothing here. "However," Vexitar continued, "there are exceptions to every rule. Warriors who overcome impossible odds through means we do not fully understand." The commander's 3 eyes seemed to look directly at Dongwu for a moment, but that was probably just his imagination. "Tell us about one, Commander," Hyejin called out, from the front row. Vextar paused at the front of the room. His scarred face showed something that might have been respect, or maybe confusion. Very well, he said slowly. Let me tell you about a warrior whose story still puzzles military analysts across the galaxy. A being who appeared 3 years ago, during one of our darkest hours. The classroom grew very quiet. Even the Krathari stopped their usual fidgeting. The Drakari invasion of Kepler 442b, Vextar began. 50,000 of their best shock troops landed on a mining colony with barely 3,000 civilian inhabitants. It should have been over in hours. Images appeared on the screen. A small, rocky planet with deep mining shafts and simple buildings. It looked peaceful and helpless. But someone was there, Vextar continued. Someone who turned that simple colony into a nightmare for one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. Dongwu's hands began to shake slightly. He pressed them, flat against his thighs, hoping no one would notice. For 6 months, this unknown warrior held off the entire invasion force, used their own weapons against them, turned their strengths into weaknesses, made them afraid to leave their ships. The alien cadets leaned forward in their seats. This was the kind of story they lived for. The Drakari called this warrior the Ghost, Vextar said, because they never saw him coming, never knew where he would strike next. Never understood how someone could be so deadly with such simple tools. Jinho whispered quietly, "Could it have been human?" A few alien cadets laughed. The idea seemed impossible to them. "We will study this case in detail," Vextar announced, "because understanding how the ghost of Kepler 442b achieved the impossible might teach us something new about the nature of warfare itself." Dongwu closed his eyes and tried to breathe normally, but his mind was already 3 years in the past, on a rocky mining planet where he had learned what it really meant to fight for something worth dying for. Commander Vextar walked to his desk and pulled out a data pad. His 3 eyes focused on the screen for a moment before he looked back at the class. The room stayed completely silent. Even the usual whispers and shuffling had stopped. Kepler 442b was not an important planet, Vextar began, his deep voice filling the large classroom. A simple mining colony on the edge of known space. The people there dug minerals from deep underground. They had no military, no weapons, no way to defend themselves. The commander touched his data pad and images appeared on the big screen. Pictures of ordinary people working in mines, families living in small houses, children playing in dusty streets between the mining equipment. 3,000 civilians, Vextar continued. Miners, engineers, doctors, teachers. Normal people living normal lives. They thought they were safe because their planet had nothing anyone would want to steal. A Veltani cadet raised her long, thin arm. But the Drakari came anyway? The Drakari Empire was expanding, Vextar explained. They wanted every planet in that sector. It did not matter if the planets were important or not. They wanted to control everything. New images showed the Drakari invasion fleet. Massive ships that looked like flying fortresses. Hundreds of smaller attack ships surrounding them. The sight made several cadets shift uncomfortably in their seats. 50,000 Drakari shock troops, Vextar said. The best warriors their empire could produce. Each one trained from birth to kill. Each one equipped with the finest weapons and armor. Dongwu stared at the screen, but his mind was somewhere else. He remembered the sound of those ships landing, the ground shaking under their weight, the terrible noise of their engines that seemed to go on forever. The invasion began at dawn, Vextar continued. The Drakari expected to control the entire planet by sunset. Their battle plans called for complete victory in 6 hours. The commander paused and looked around the room. His scarred face was serious. But something went wrong with their plan. More images appeared. Drakari soldiers advancing through the colony. Their black armor made them look like walking death. Their weapons could punch holes through solid metal. Nothing should have been able to stop them. The first sign of trouble came after 2 hours, Vextar explained. A Drakari patrol went silent, then another, then a third. Their commanders thought it was just equipment problems. Jinho leaned forward in his seat. What was really happening? Someone was hunting them, Vextar replied. Someone who knew the colony better than the invaders. Someone who could move through the mining tunnels without being seen. The screen. showed a map of the colony. Hundreds of tunnels ran under the ground like a giant maze. Some went down for miles into the planet's core. Others connected different parts of the settlement. The Ghost used these tunnels like highways, Vextar said. Could appear anywhere, strike without warning, disappear before the Drakari could respond. Hyjin asked, what kind of weapons did this Ghost use? Vextar touched his datapad again. Images of strange weapons appeared on the screen. They looked like they had been built from pieces of mining equipment and spare parts. Nothing fancy, the commander explained. Mining explosives turned into bombs, cutting tools made into weapons, even simple rocks launched from improvised slings. But somehow these basic weapons worked, a Krathari cadet laughed. How could mining tools hurt Drakari armor? That is the mystery, Vextar replied. The Ghost did not try to break through their armor. Instead, he found ways to use their strength against them. The commander showed video footage from Drakari helmet cameras, soldiers walking through narrow tunnels. Suddenly, the ceiling collapsed on them, not enough to kill, but enough to trap them underground for hours. Or this, Vextar said, showing another video. Drakari soldiers fell into hidden pits filled with sharp mining tools. Their own weight drove the spikes through gaps in their armor. The psychological impact was enormous, the commander continued. These Drakari warriors had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never been afraid of anything. But the Ghost made them afraid of shadows. So Young, one of the human cadets, spoke up. How long did this go on? 6 months, Vextar answered. For half a year, 50,000 Drakari soldiers could not defeat one unknown warrior. They controlled the landing zones and main buildings, but everywhere else belonged to the Ghost. The classroom was completely quiet now. Even the alien cadets who usually looked bored were paying attention. The Drakari brought in specialists, Vextar explained. Trackers who could follow any trail. Psychic hunters who could sense fear and hatred. Technical experts who could detect any electronic signature. Did they find the Ghost? Taemin asked. They never even got close, Vexatar replied. The Ghost left no trail to follow. Showed no emotions the psychics could detect. Used no technology the scanners could find. It was like fighting an actual ghost. The commander brought up more images. Drakari supply convoys destroyed by cleverly placed explosives. Communication towers cut down in the night. Medical supplies poisoned with local plants that made the soldiers sick but did not kill them. The Ghost never took lives unnecessarily, Vextar noted. Could have killed thousands but chose to wound and frighten instead. Made the Drakari afraid to eat their own food. Afraid to sleep in their own beds. Afraid to patrol alone. Dongwu's hands were shaking again. He remembered being so tired he could barely stand. Remembered crawling through tunnels so narrow he could barely breathe. Remembered the smell of fear that came from the Drakari camps. Then one day, it was over, Vextar said quietly. The Ghost appeared at the Drakari command post. Not to attack, but to deliver a message. What kind of message? Wujin asked. 3 words carved into a metal plate, Vextar replied. They were not alone. The commander paused and looked around the room again. The next morning, every Drakari ship left Kepler 442b. 50,000 of their best soldiers, defeated by one unknown warrior who used nothing but mining tools and clever thinking. Who was it? Several cadets asked at the same time. Vextar shook his head. Nobody knows. The Ghost disappeared as completely as if he had never existed. Left no trace, no name, no explanation. The commander touched his datapad one more time. But we do have this. A grainy video appeared on the screen. A figure in makeshift armor moved through the shadows of a mining tunnel. The image was too dark and blurry to see details, but something about the way the person moved made Dongwu's heart race. This is the only clear footage we have of the Ghost of Kepler 442b, Vextar announced. Tomorrow we will study every second of it. We will try to understand how one being could achieve the impossible. The class ended, but nobody moved. They all stared at the frozen image on the screen. A warrior who had saved 3,000 innocent people using nothing but courage and intelligence. Dongwu finally stood up, his legs feeling weak. As he walked toward the door, he heard the other cadets talking excitedly about the legend they had just learned, none of them noticed that his hands had not stopped shaking. Heejin could not stop looking at the frozen image on the screen. While the other cadets whispered excitedly about the ghost's amazing victory, she studied every detail of the blurry figure. Her engineering training had taught her to notice things that others missed. Small details that told big stories. The way the ghost held his makeshift weapon was wrong for a Krathari warrior. Their claws would grip differently. The stance was too low for a Veltani fighter. Their long legs made them stand taller even when trying to hide. The movement pattern looked almost familiar, like something she had seen before. Commander Vextar played the footage again. "Watch carefully," he told the class. "Notice how the ghost moves through the tunnel. See how he checks corners. Study his weapon handling." Haijin watched the short video loop over and over. The ghost's shoulders were narrow like a human's. His height matched what she would expect from her own species. But that could not be right. Humans were too soft for this kind of warfare. Everyone knew that. She turned slightly in her seat to look back at her human classmates. Jin Ho was staring at the screen with his mouth open. Taimin looked amazed and proud. So Young seemed to be trying to memorize every frame of the video. Then she saw Dong Wu. Her quiet friend sat perfectly still in his chair. His face was pale white, like he had seen something terrible. His hands gripped the edges of his desk so tightly that his knuckles looked like bone. While everyone else leaned forward to see better, Dong Wu looked like he wanted to disappear. "The improvised weapon is particularly interesting," Commander Vextar continued. "Look at how the ghost modified this mining laser. Reduced the power output but increased the range. Very clever engineering." Hae Jin nodded, but part of her attention stayed on Dong Wu. Something about his reaction bothered her. He looked scared, but not the way someone gets scared by hearing a frightening story. He looked scared the way someone gets when their secret is about to be discovered. "The armor is also worth studying," Vextar said. "Built from mining equipment and scrap metal. Not pretty, but it worked. Protected against Drakari weapons while staying light enough for quick movement." A Krathari cadet raised his clawed hand. "Commander, how do we know this ghost was working alone? Maybe he had help from other colonists." "Good question," Vextar replied. "The Drakari searched for months trying to find accomplices. They questioned every colonist they could catch, used truth scanners and mind probes, found nothing." Hijin remembered something Dongwu had said during their first week at the academy. Someone had asked him where he came from, and he had answered, "A mining colony on the edge of space." Most human cadets came from Earth or the major colony worlds. But Dongwu had mentioned miners and engineers just like the people on Kepler 442b. She looked back at him again. He was breathing too fast, like someone having trouble getting enough air. His eyes never left the screen, but they had a distant look, like he was seeing something different from what everyone else saw. The psychological warfare was the most effective part, Commander Vextar explained. The ghost did not just fight the Drakari soldiers. He broke their confidence, made them doubt themselves and their mission. The commander showed more footage. Drakari soldiers jumping at shadows, officers arguing with each other, groups of warriors refusing to patrol certain areas because they were too scared. "How did one person do all this?" asked Wu Jin. "That is what makes this case so interesting," Vextar replied. "The ghost seems to have understood something about warfare that even our best military theorists missed. That fear can be a more powerful weapon than any gun or bomb." Haijin thought about the times she had worked with Dong Wu on engineering projects. He always knew exactly how to fix broken equipment. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years working with tools and machines. When she asked him questions about technical things, he gave answers that were too detailed for someone who had only learned from textbooks. The mining tunnels were key to the ghost's strategy, Vexitar continued. Someone with deep knowledge of the colony's layout could move unseen for miles underground, but that would require years of familiarity with the tunnel system. Dongwu made a small sound, like someone trying not to cough. When Hie Jin looked at him, she saw that his face had gone from pale to gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air in the classroom. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He nodded quickly but did not look at her. His attention stayed fixed on the screen, where the grainy footage played again and again. The ghost left behind some personal items, Commander, Vextar said. Small things that tell us about his character? A wooden carving of a family, pictures drawn by children, letters written in simple language. Hyejin saw Dongwu's jaw clench tight. His breathing became even faster. These items suggest the ghost was fighting to protect people he cared about, the commander explained. Not for glory or conquest, but for love. That kind of motivation can make even ordinary beings do extraordinary things. A Veltani cadet spoke up with her musical voice. Commander, do we know what happened to the colonists? Were they all saved? Most of them survived, Vextar replied. The ghost's tactics kept the Drakari focused on hunting him instead of hurting civilians. When the invasion force finally left, they took fewer than 100 prisoners. Everyone else was free. For the first time since the class began, Dongwu smiled. It was tiny and lasted only a second, but Hyejin caught it. The expression on his face was not relief at hearing good news about strangers. It was the deep satisfaction of someone who had accomplished something important. All the pieces clicked together in her mind like parts of a machine fitting into place. Dongwu's knowledge of mining equipment, his calm behavior during combat, simulations, his reaction to stories about Kepler 442b, the way he moved which matched the movement patterns she had seen in the footage. Her friend was not just any human cadet. He was the ghost of Kepler 442b. Hyejin felt dizzy as the truth hit her. The quiet boy who sat in the back of every class, who never spoke up or showed off, who let alien cadets treat him like he was worthless, had single-handedly defeated 50,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors. She looked around the classroom at all the alien cadets who dismissed humans as weak and soft. They were sitting in the same room as the greatest warrior in recent galactic history, and they had no idea. Tomorrow we will analyze the footage frame by frame, Commander Vextar announced. We will try to learn the ghost's secrets. Perhaps we can apply his methods to our own military training. The class began to end, and cadets started gathering their things. Hyejin watched Dongwu stand up slowly, like his body was heavy and tired. He moved toward the door with the same careful steps she had seen in the surveillance video. She had to say something, had to let him know that his secret was safe with her. But first, she needed to understand why he was hiding the most amazing achievement in modern military history. As Dongwu reached the door, he paused and looked back at the screen one more time. The image of the ghost flickered there, a shadowy figure who had saved thousands of innocent lives. Then he walked out of the room, carrying his secret like a heavy weight that no one else could see. The next day arrived too quickly for Dongwu. He had barely slept, tossing and turning in his narrow bunk while Jinho snored peacefully nearby. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the grainy footage from Commander Vexitar's class. His own, face hidden behind that makeshift mask, moving through tunnels he knew better than his own heartbeat. Walking to the classroom felt like walking to his execution. Jinho chattered beside him about the amazing ghost warrior, completely unaware that his roommate was the person he admired so much. Other cadets filled the hallways with excited conversations about the legend they were studying. I bet the ghost was a Veltani, said one alien cadet to his friend. Only they are smart enough for that kind of planning. No way, replied a Krathari. Had to be one of us. Takes real warrior blood to fight like that. Dongwu kept his head down and said nothing. Let them argue about something they would never understand. The classroom buzzed with energy when they arrived. Even the alien cadets who usually acted bored seemed interested today. Everyone wanted to solve the mystery of the ghost's identity. Everyone except Dongwu, who wished the mystery would stay buried forever. Commander Vextar entered with his heavy footsteps and the room fell silent. He carried a datapad and wore the serious expression that meant today's lesson would be important. Yesterday, we learned about the ghost of Kepler 442b, the commander began. Today we analyze the evidence. We study every detail until we understand how this victory was achieved. The large screen came alive with the surveillance footage, but this time it played in slow motion. Every movement stretched out so the class could see exactly what the ghost was doing. Notice the weapon grip, Vexitar pointed out. See how the fingers wrap around the modified mining tool. This tells us about hand size and strength. Dongwu watched himself on screen and felt sick. He remembered the weight of that improvised weapon, how his hands had blistered from gripping it too tightly, how many nights he had fallen asleep still holding it, afraid to let go even for a moment. The stance is interesting too, the commander continued. Low to the ground, but not crouched like a Krathari would be. The balance suggests someone used to working in tight spaces. A Veltani cadet raised her long arm. Commander, the tunnel layout in the footage matches the mining colony's engineering reports. Whoever this was knew the underground system very well. Correct, Vextar agreed. This was not a visiting warrior or hired soldier. The ghost had to be someone who lived on Kepler 442b. Someone who knew every tunnel, every hiding spot, every weak point in the Drakari defenses. Hyejin turned in her seat to look at Dongwu. Her eyes were full of knowledge and something that might have been sympathy. She had figured it out. He could see it in her face. The question was what she would do with that knowledge. Let us examine the tactical choices, Commander Vextar said. Here, the ghost sets up an ambush near the main mining shaft. Why this location? Several cadets offered theories. The high ground advantage, multiple escape routes, good sight lines for the improvised weapons. They were all wrong, but they were trying. Dongwu knew the real reason. His family's quarters had been just 200 meters from that shaft. He could protect their hiding spot while still having access to the tunnel system, but he could not say that without revealing everything. The psychological warfare was brilliant, a Krathari cadet admitted grudgingly, making the Drakari afraid of their own shadows. That takes real understanding of enemy psychology. How does someone learn to think like that? Asked So Young. Commander Vextar paused the footage and looked around the room. Perhaps someone who had studied Drakari tactics before, someone who knew their strengths and weaknesses. Dongwu had studied Drakari tactics, but not in school. He had learned by watching them hunt him through the tunnels, by surviving their attacks day after day, by turning their own arrogance into his greatest weapon. The improvised equipment shows advanced engineering knowledge, Hyejin said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at the brilliant human cadet. Whoever modified these mining tools understood both the original machinery and Drakari armor weaknesses. An excellent observation, Vextar agreed. The ghost was not just a warrior. He was also an engineer, a tactician, and a survivor. Dongwu felt the walls closing in around him. Every analysis brought them closer to the truth. Soon someone would ask the right question or notice the right detail, and his secret would be exposed. Commander, said Taemin, do we know anything about the ghost's background? Family, education, military training? The personal items left behind suggest someone very young, Vextar replied. The handwriting in recovered journals appears to be that of someone barely out of their teens. Yet this young person accomplished what seasoned military commanders thought impossible. The room fell quiet as everyone thought about that. A teenager had defeated 50,000 professional soldiers. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there on the screen. That makes it even more amazing, whispered Wu Jin. Dongwu could not take it anymore. Listening to them talk about him, like he was some kind of legend, felt wrong. He was not a legend. He was just someone who had been scared and desperate and lucky enough to survive. But more than that, he was tired of watching his fellow humans get dismissed and looked down on. Tired of alien cadets acting like humanity was too weak to produce real warriors. The ghost story proved they were wrong, but they would never believe it unless they heard the truth. He stood up slowly. The movement felt strange, like his body was not his own. Every eye in the classroom turned toward him. Jinho looked confused. Hyejin looked worried. The alien cadets looked annoyed that someone was interrupting their analysis. Cadet Dongwu, Commander Vextar said, do you have a question about the tactical analysis? Dongwu opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. His throat felt dry as sand. His heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment. That would change everything. Once he spoke, there would be no going back to being invisible. He looked around the room one more time, at the alien cadets who thought humans were weak, at his human classmates who believed they were inferior, at Commander Vextar, who had unknowingly been teaching a class about someone sitting right in front of him. I do not have a question, Dongwu said quietly. His voice sounded strange in the silent room. I have something to tell you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Several cadets shifted in their seats. Commander Vexitar's three eyes focused on him with sudden intensity. Dongwu took a deep breath and looked directly at the frozen image on the screen. At the shadowy figure who had saved his family and his home. "That warrior you are studying," he said, his voice getting stronger with each word. "That ghost who fought the Drakari for 6 months. That person who saved 3,000 colonists with nothing but mining tools and determination?" He paused and looked around the room one more time. "That warrior, that's me." The silence that followed was so complete that Dongwu could hear his own heartbeat. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. They all just stared at the quiet human cadet who had just claimed to be the greatest warrior legend of their generation. The silence stretched on like a held breath that might never be released. Dongwu stood beside his desk, feeling every pair of eyes in the room staring at him. Some looked shocked. Others looked confused. A few alien cadets had expressions that clearly said they thought he was lying or crazy. Commander Vexitar was the first to speak. His deep voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "That is a very serious claim, Cadet Dongwu," the commander said slowly. "The ghost of Kepler 442b is considered one of the greatest military achievements in recent history. You are saying that you, a first-year cadet, accomplished this?" "Yes, sir," Dongwu replied. His voice was steady now. The hardest part was over. He had spoken the truth, and there was no taking it back. A Krathari cadet laughed harshly. "This is ridiculous. Look at him. He is barely big enough to carry a real weapon, much less defeat 50,000 Drakari warriors." "Anyone can make wild claims," added a Veltani cadet. "Where is your proof?" Commander Vexitar held up one clawed hand for silence. His three eyes studied Dongwu with new interest. "Very well, cadet. If you are truly the ghost, then you should be able to provide details that only the real warrior would know. Information that was never released to the public." Dongwu nodded. He had expected this. "What would you like to know, sir?" "The hidden supply cache in Tunnel Section 7, Vexitar said immediately. "Our reports mention it but give no details about its contents or exact location." 50 meters down the main shaft. Third branch to the left," Dongwu answered without hesitation. "Behind a fake wall made from mining equipment panels. Inside you would find modified explosive charges, medical supplies stolen from Drakari patrols, and 3 bottles of water that I saved for emergencies." The commander touched his data pad, checking the information against classified reports. His scarred face showed surprise. "Correct," he said quietly. "That could be a lucky guess," protested a Krathari cadet. "The Drakari communication codes," Vexitar continued, ignoring the interruption. "How did the ghost break their encryption?" Dongwu almost smiled. "I did not break it, sir. I recorded their radio chatter during the first week and noticed they repeated certain phrases at the same time every day. Weather reports, status updates, meal times. Once I figured out the pattern, I could predict when they would be distracted." More checking of the datapad. More surprise on the commander's face. "The final message left for the Drakari command," Vexitar said. "What exactly did it say?" "They were not alone," Dongwu replied. "Carved into a piece of mining equipment outside, their main headquarters. I wanted them to know that even if they captured or killed me, the colonists would never stop fighting for their freedom." Jinho stared at his roommate with his mouth hanging open. "Dongwu, you really did all this?" "The improvised armor," Commander Vexitar continued his questioning. "Describe its construction." "Mining helmet with extra metal plates welded on," Dongwu said. "Chest protection made from conveyor belt material and equipment housings. The joints were weak points, so I used flexible mining cable to connect the pieces. It was heavy and uncomfortable, but it stopped Drakari energy weapons." "The psychological warfare techniques," Vexitar pressed. "How did you break the morale of trained soldiers?" Dongwu was quiet for a moment, remembering those dark months underground. "I made them feel helpless, sir. Drakari warriors are taught that strength and aggression solve all problems, so I never fought them directly. I made them chase shadows, made them afraid of empty tunnels, made them jump at sounds. That meant nothing." "But how?" asked Hyejin. "I left false trails that led nowhere, set up fake ambush sites with no one in them. played recordings of my voice from different locations so they never knew where I really was. After a while, they started seeing threats. That did not exist. Commander Vextar set down his datapad and looked directly at Dongwu. The serial numbers of the 3 Drakari vehicles you disabled in Week 4. Without hesitation, Dongwu rattled off a string of numbers and letters. The commander checked his files and his 3 eyes widened. "Impossible," whispered a Veltani, Cadet. "Those numbers were never made public." "Tell them about your family," Jin said gently. Dongwu's expression softened. "My parents were chief mining engineers. They knew every tunnel better than anyone. My little sister Daun was 12 years old. She drew pictures of our family that I carried with me during the fighting." He looked around the room at all the shocked faces. "When the Drakari came, I was home visiting from basic military training. Just a few weeks of simple soldier classes. Nothing special. But when those ships landed and I saw my family hiding in the emergency shelters, I knew I had to do something." "You fought for 6 months to protect 3,000 people you barely knew?" asked So Young. "I fought for 6 months to protect my family," Dongwu corrected. "The other colonists were just also my responsibility. They were my neighbors, my parents' friends, Dayun's teachers and classmates. You do not abandon people like that?" Commander Vextar stood up from his desk. The room fell silent again as the massive Krathari warrior walked over to stand in front of Dongwu. For a moment, it looked like he might attack the small human cadet. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone even more. Commander Vextar, veteran of a dozen major battles, scarred hero of the Krathari military, slowly raised his clawed hand to his forehead in a perfect military salute. "I apologize, Ghost," he said formally. "I did not recognize a superior warrior when he sat in my classroom." The words hit the other cadets like a physical blow. A Krathari commander was saluting a human, not just any human, but the quiet one they had all ignored and dismissed. One by one, other cadets began to stand. First Jin, then Jin Ho, then the rest of the human students. Even some of the alien cadets rose from their seats, looking uncertain but respectful. "I have one more question," Commander Vextar said, lowering his salute. "Yes, sir? Why did you come to the Academy? After what you accomplished on Kepler 442b, you could have written your own ticket to any position in the galaxy." Dongwu looked down at his hands, the same hands that had built weapons from mining equipment and saved thousands of lives. "Because it is going to happen again, sir," he said quietly. "The Drakari or someone like them will attack another colony. Another group of families will need protection. I came here to learn how to do it better next time." He looked up and met the commander's eyes. "I came here to make sure no other 12-year-old girl has to hide in an emergency shelter while her big brother fights monsters in the dark." The classroom stayed quiet for a long time after that. Everyone was thinking about what they had just heard, about assumptions they had made, about the quiet human cadet who had been sitting among them all along. Finally, Commander Vextar spoke. "Again." Class dismissed. "Tomorrow we will begin studying ghost tactics from someone who actually knows what he is talking about." As the other cadets filed out, many of them stopped to look at Dongwu with new respect. Some even apologized for the way they had treated him and other humans. Jinho waited until they were alone before speaking. "You never said anything," he said simply. "You never asked," Dongwu replied. They walked back to their room together, but everything had changed. Dongwu was no longer the invisible cadet who sat in the back of the class. He was the ghost of Kepler 402b, and everyone would remember that. Later that night, he received a message on his personal communicator. It was from Dayun, now 15 years old and still living on Kepler 442b with their parents. "The whole colony is proud of you," she wrote. "But we already knew you were a hero. You did not have to prove it to anyone else." Dongwu smiled and put the communicator away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new responsibilities. But tonight, for the first time in months, he slept peacefully.